Title: I fell off the mountain and miscarried while he was with his lover. When I woke up, I forgot him. Chapter 1: The Lonely Climb. The snow fell steadily, blanketing the mountain trail in a pristine white cover. Emma's breaths came in shallow, visible puffs as she ascended the winding path. She had chosen this particular mountain because it was said to be a place where prayers were answered, especially prayers for the unborn. Her gloved hands trembled as she pulled her coat tighter, not from the cold but from the weight of her thoughts. It was her and Victor's third wedding anniversary. But instead of spending it with her, Victor was with her, Claire, the woman he had always referred to as his dream girl. Emma had long suspected their closeness, but confronting him never seemed to matter. His heart had drifted away a long time ago. At the base of the mountain, she had made a wish. She prayed that this child, growing within her, would be the light that could reignite their dying marriage. With every step she took up the trail, she prayed for her baby's health, for Victor to love her again, for the life they had once dreamt of together. As she neared the summit, the snowfall thickened, the wind picking up. The path grew slippery, but Emma pressed on, driven by hope and the desperate desire to make things right. She reached a sharp turn when her boot slipped on the ice. Suddenly, the world tilted. Her hands clawed at the ground, trying to grip onto anything, but the snow offered no support. She tumbled, a scream torn from her throat as she fell down the slope, her body hitting rocks and hard snow with each roll. Pain radiated through her abdomen, sharp and unbearable, as if the world was tearing her apart. Chapter 2: The Rescue. Hours later, Victor was driving up the mountain road, Claire's laughter still ringing in his ears from their earlier encounter. His phone had been flooded with missed calls from Emma's friends, each one sounding more panicked than the last. When he arrived at the base of the mountain, fear gripped his chest. She went alone, one of Emma's friends told him. To pray for your baby. Guilt twisted in Victor's stomach as he hurried up the trail, shouting her name. It was almost dark when he found her, lying in the snow, unconscious and battered. He fell to his knees, his hands trembling as he gently cradled her cold, limp body. Blood had soaked through her clothing, the dark stain stark against the white snow. Emma, no, please, God, no. His voice cracked as he called for help, his heart pounding in his chest. He was losing her, he could feel it. Hours later, at the hospital, the doctors delivered the devastating news: Emma had miscarried due to the fall. Victor felt the weight of the world crashing down on him. The baby was gone. His hands shook as he sat by her bedside, waiting for her to wake up, consumed by guilt. Chapter 3: Amnesia. When Emma finally stirred, Victor leapt to his feet, hope surging through him. Her eyes fluttered open, their familiar blue depths scanning the room. For a brief moment, he thought everything would be okay. But her gaze was empty. Emma, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Do you remember me? She blinked, confusion clouding her features. Who are you? The words hit Victor like a punch to the gut. He reached out to hold her hand, but she pulled away, her expression distant. The doctors explained that the trauma from the fall had caused temporary amnesia. She had forgotten everything, even him. The baby, their marriage, their life together, it was all gone from her mind. Victor nearly broke down. He had never been the best husband. He knew that. He had pushed her away, neglected her, spent time with Claire when Emma needed him the most. But now, standing there, watching her look at him as if he were a stranger, he realized how much he stood to lose. Chapter 4: A Cold Distance. Over the next few days, Victor stayed by Emma's side, telling her stories of their life together, trying to jog her memory. He showed her photos of their wedding, reminded her of their shared dreams, and even brought up the child they had lost. But each time, Emma's gaze remained cold and detached. She listened to him politely, but there was no warmth in her eyes, no recognition. The more he tried to get her to remember, the more distant she seemed. It was as if she had built a wall between them, and no matter what he did, he couldn't break through. One night, as he sat by her hospital bed, he finally broke down. Please, Emma. I know I've been a terrible husband. But I love you. I need you to remember us, to remember our baby. Her eyes met his, but there was no compassion in them, only a quiet, chilling resolve. I don't know who you are, she said softly. But I don't think I want to remember. Victor felt his heart shatter. The cold, distant tone in her voice was the same one he had often used with her during their marriage. She was treating him the way he had treated her. Chapter 5: A Life Reclaimed. As the weeks passed, Emma's physical wounds healed, but her memory remained a blank slate. She was discharged from the hospital, but instead of going home with Victor, she requested to stay with her family. They agreed, seeing how confused and detached she still was from her former life. Victor tried visiting her every day, but each time, Emma's demeanor was icy. She began rebuilding her life without him, as if erasing the painful memories along with the love they once shared. She took up new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and even started a new job. To everyone around her, she seemed to be flourishing. But to Victor, it was like watching his entire world slip through his fingers. He had lost her, and he didn't know how to get her back. Chapter 6: Claire's Return. As Victor struggled to cope with Emma's amnesia, Claire re-entered his life, seeing the vulnerability and chaos surrounding him. She offered comfort, reminding him of their easy companionship, of the carefree times they had shared. But this time, Victor found no solace in her presence. Claire had once been his dream, but now, she only reminded him of everything he had lost with Emma. One evening, Claire tried to rekindle their romance, but Victor pulled away. "I can't," he said, his voice hollow. "I can't pretend anymore. I don't love you." For the first time, Claire saw the depth of his pain, and she realized that whatever they had was nothing compared to the love he had lost with Emma. She left him, knowing that his heart would never belong to her. Chapter 7: A Final Plea. Months passed, and Emma's life continued to move forward without Victor. She had no memory of their time together, no recollection of the love or the pain they had shared. But deep down, she felt a strange emptiness, as if something crucial was missing from her life. One day, Victor came to see her one last time. He was thinner, more worn than she remembered, but there was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I know you don't remember me," he said quietly, standing in the doorway of her new apartment. "And maybe it's better that way. But I want you to know. I'll never stop loving you. No matter what happens, I'll always be waiting for you to come back." Emma watched him leave, her heart heavy with something she couldn't quite name. She didn't know this man, didn't know the history they had shared, but something about his words stirred something deep inside her. As the door closed behind him, Emma felt the first stirrings of something long buried. Was it a memory? Or was it the beginning of something new? Epilogue: The Path Forward. A year later, Emma stood at the base of the mountain where she had once fallen. The path was no longer snowy and treacherous but bathed in the golden light of autumn. She had returned to pray again, though this time, her prayers were not for a child or a marriage, but for herself, for healing, for peace, for closure. As she stood there, a familiar figure approached. It was Victor, looking older, wiser, and filled with a quiet kind of hope. "Mind if I join you?" he asked softly. Emma looked at him for a long moment, her heart stirring in a way that felt both familiar and foreign. She nodded, and together they began the climb. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she was ready to take the next step, whether it led her back to Victor or somewhere else entirely.